you can still report on the game and the happenings in the game without necessarily the quotes, because most of the
Yeah.
quotes are kind of canned or cookie cutter, or the people that are giving you the great quotes are the ones that actually want to talk to the media. You know,
Mm, yeah.
Naomi's going to be up there giving you one word answers, or she's not going to really be engaging with you on that level. She's not going to be uh, fascinating in a public space because that's just not who she is publicly. So I don't know why you need to force that out of her.
Let me put you on game.
Uh, let's move into a different topic. I wanted to talk about Naomi Osaka and her what is essentially a boycott against press availability. Uh, and I want to talk about if athletes should be obligated to speak to the media, because there's a lot of athletes that have gone up against this, whether you're talking about a Kyrie Irving or Marshawn Lynch, who have faced this before. So essentially, for you guys who are not familiar with the story, Naomi Osaka is widely considered the best women's tennis player and one of the best tennis players overall in the world. And she also is, I think, the highest earning female athlete ever in terms of like 1 year, because I think
Mm,
she brought in $37 million last year.
wow.
So there's a lot behind her.
Yeah.
But she essentially decided that she wasn't going to do press during the French Open. Uh, she was quoted as saying, "We're often sat there and asked questions that we've been asked multiple times before, or asked questions that bring doubt into our minds. And I'm not going to subject myself to people that doubt me." And the response from the powers that be was essentially that she was fined 15
Hmm.
grand and threatened with suspension. And she released a press release. I'm not going to read all of it because it's a lot, but
Yeah.
she said, "Hey, everyone, this isn't a situation I ever imagined or attended when I posted a few days ago. I think now the best thing for the tournament and the other players and my well being is that I withdraw so everyone can get back to focusing on the tennis going on in Paris. I never wanted to be a distraction, and I accept that my timing was not ideal and my message could have been clear.
Hmm.
The truth is that I have suffered long bouts of depression since the US Open in 2018, and I've had a really hard time coping with that. Anyone that knows me knows I'm introverted, and anyone that has seen me at the tournaments will notice that I'm often wearing headphones as that helps dull my social anxiety. I'm not a natural speaker, and I get huge waves of anxiety before I speak to the world's media." Uh, yeah, so that she goes on to say more, but she's essentially saying that she's not comfortable with the media attention. And if you ever watched one of her interviews, you can kind of tell she's very short. She will avoid eye contact. She often looks down, and she can be very quiet. And it almost seems like she's coming off awkwardly.
Mm,
And you assume that that's her personality, but now that we know that it's connected to anxiety. But I wanted to talk to you about the media, because the media often kind of positions this as saying that athletes have an obligation to speak to them in order to help them do their jobs. And people have cited her earnings as well as a reason for her to conduct herself and to do media interactions in the way that she's expected to. So I wanted to just
yeah.
ask, like, when you first saw this story, like, what were your immediate reactions, and what's your response to her essentially boycotting the media?
Um, I when I first saw it, the first thing that kind of came to my mind is that this is another athlete that is citing mental health as being a big factor in her ability to perform and her ability to actually feel comfortable in her role as a media icon, because that's what athletes become. They become, darlings in the eye of the public. And sometimes, and oftentimes, especially lately in recent years, we're finding out how taxing that can be towards the psyche of these players that we admire and adore. And she said that this all started in 2018. not surprisingly, after she won, her first title and became a national kind of story, oh, can she beat, Serena? Is this the next person to kind of dethrone Serena? And all this attention and all this hyping. And it really says to me that a lot of athletes are so singularly focused on performing that sometimes maybe they might not get the proper preparation to actually deal with what it's like to be a top athlete, to have all the attention on you, and for people to look up to you and demand so much of you. And that pressure, everybody handles it differently. And some people are just completely built for it, like a LeBron James who talks all the time and, seems to love all the attention and spotlight. And other people, whether you're a Naomi Osaka, whether you're Marshawn Lynch that says, I'm only here so I don't get fined, whether you're Allen Iverson talking about practice, it's like there are these media moments where you realize, man, some of the reporters, they ask some very silly questions and don't put the athletes in the best light, and they often feel like they're being set up. So I have tremendous sympathy for her and what she's going through. I think it's really brave of her to kind of make this stance and say, hey, you know what? I can't really get what I want in this situation, and my mental health is more important than this tournament. And so I need to get that taken care of and figure out why exactly I'm having such, depression and anxiety that is affecting my ability to actually get out there and do my job. So, kudos to her, and I hope that she gets all the resources and attention that she needs. But it really goes to show how much we're expecting of some of these athletes and how some of them just are not prepared for that.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think that it needs to be a part of their obligations, because I think that what Naomi signed up for was to be the best tennis player she could be, not necessarily the best public speaker she could be. So
yeah,
it's tough to, I understand the media has to do their jobs and they need the sound bites, they need the interviews, but I think that if an athlete is capable of doing that they should try to, in order to, because the media is very important in terms of sports. It's how sports is marketed. It helps build and grow the brands of the athletes themselves and helps to build and grow the brands of the actual sports leagues. So it is important. But at the same time, I think that there are certain players that realize that they aren't necessarily equipped to operate in that space at that time. Like Kyrie's been very open about him being far more concerned with worldly issues or issues in his own personal life than he is concerned with answering these questions. And Marshawn Lynch's perspective was kind of connected to what you spoke to in terms of him believing that the media would twist his words because of an article that was written about him early on in his career that he didn't like. So he was just like, from that point on, averse to talking to the media, which is understandable. I think most of us would operate in that way if we felt like someone wasn't going to operate with our best interest in mind, even though most media members do. Most media members operate with the best interest of the athletes in mind, or at least they're capable of not putting the athletes down or presenting them in a bad light.
Yeah.
So it's tough. It's a tough situation, but if you're the media, I think that you can operate without her input, because not only is she going to be asked cookie cutter questions, because I mean, how many questions have we heard that basically end with the answer being the classic Rasheed Wallace, like both teams played hard? like most media questions, I feel like 99% of them are incredibly uninteresting. So it's like, you can still report on the game and the happenings in the game without necessarily the quotes, because most of the quotes are kind of canned or cookie cutter, or the people that are giving you the great quotes are the ones that actually want to talk to the media. Naomi's going to be up there giving you one word answers, or she's not going to really be engaging with you on that level. She's not going to be fascinating in a public space, because that's just not who she is publicly. So I don't know why you need to force that out of her. And I think she's operating also in the most respectful way she can. Like, I didn't read all of her quote because it's like a 2-page note in an iPhone, but she seemed like she's trying to be the most appeasing that she can to the people that are demanding this of her, that are demanding that she engage with the media. She's trying to say like, hey, like I understand, but like I can't. Like this is not what I'm set up to do. So maybe like I'm sure there's a compromise that they could work through where like maybe you could send her a list of questions and she can answer them in her own home and send you the video, or maybe she can speak about when she's ready to talk about whatever happened in one particular match. She can post a video herself and actually control the narrative, or she can do one of those player centric articles and write about it. Like there's multiple different ways to interact with the media. So I don't think she necessarily needs to be forced to basically give, a high school presentation after every performance.
Yeah. And I think that's a fair point. I think compromise in this situation is definitely something that can take place because 37 million is amazing, but the money doesn't matter if when they put a microphone in your face and you have to answer questions to the global media and you get anxious, which prevents you from being able to be yourself. That's not good for anybody. That's not good for the media that are trying to ask interesting questions, get good sound bites. That's not good for her and her ability to compete and feeling like, oh man, like at the end of this competition, now I got to answer all these questions. In this situation, nobody's really winning. Tennis isn't winning because they don't have a star, their star out there performing. And there has to be a middle ground in this situation. And if they're wise, they're going to get creative and figure out something to do in that regard, because the media is important in driving interest and revenue for these players. Articles being written about them, think pieces, thought pieces on their stats and their accomplishments. It's all a part of the machine that has allowed professional athletic sports to garner the interest that it has, and for them to be as wealthy and as successful as they can possibly be. So I think that there should be enough interested parties to solve this issue and kind of get to the place that needs to be gotten to in order for there to be a meaningful resolution. Otherwise, tennis might lose its next best superstar after Serena eventually retires. You kind of need a name like Naomi Osaka out there in order to continue to bolster the female division of the sport.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not 1972 anymore, like that's not the only way that you can interact with athletes. So like you said, hopefully there can be a meaningful compromise in terms of her being able to compete, but the media also getting what they need to do their jobs. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. I think that it's interesting the space that these athletes have to exist in. And I love, when we get to cover not only sports like we did with the NBA playoffs, but also cover the surrounding issues with the world and surrounding issues about sports. And we'll continue to do that. But